The end of the first OWCS season is finally here, and you know what that means? It's awards time. The OWCS has their own set of awards, and today, I'm going to talk about my thoughts on who should win each award as well as giving them out for myself. Now, if you've been paying attention to my channel recently, you've probably seen all of the recent community polls. Well, I'm not only going to be giving out my own awards based on personal thought, but I'll also be showing the results of the polls as well. So, if you want to be a part of anything else I do like this in the future, or you just like Overwatch esports, consider subscribing to this channel and leaving a like on this video. Leave a comment down below on who you would vote for. Now, just to be clear, my thoughts will not always reflect the polls, and the polls did not influence my votes, as these polls are pretty much for fun and just to hear what my community thinks. These votes are entirely my own thoughts, and I made all of my choices before I put out the polls. Now, with that said, the awards we'll be going over today are the best player at each position at each region. I will select one tank, Hitscan, Flex DPS, Flex Support, and Main Support from the main three regions, those being Korea, NA, and EMEA. For each pick, I will also say who my runner-up is, as well as show what everybody in the community thinks. With all this big intro out of the way, let's start out with the strongest of the three regions, that being Korea. Korea have been dominant all season, and that's the reason I'm not going to be giving out awards for combined regions, since Korea would just sweep every category. Starting out with tank though, my tank Korean MVP is Junbin. Junbin has had quite the redemption arc this year, and it's clear to say that the hero on the shock was definitely a fluke. His Ball, Winston, Orisa, Ram, and even Maga were all super good, and who could forget that Hog performance in Dallas? When Junbin goes Ball, it is absolutely over for his opponents, and he's just been so good all year. As for the poll, you all agreed with me that Junbin was the best this year, with 67% of you also choosing Junbin, which does make sense. My runner-up for the year has to be Bernard, who has been super good this season, although I think people are still sleeping on him. I know Zeta were a little all over the place this year, but Bernard was the most stable part of that team, and he looked like a top 3 tank all year. Also, shout out to Donghack for putting Fnatic on his back. He's not getting the honorable mention over Bernard, but that guy was goated this season. Moving over to Hitscan, this one will surprise absolutely no one. It's Lip. And to be honest, there aren't many people who can even compete with this guy, and the poll 100% agrees, with a whopping 88% of people also choosing Lip. Lip is still somehow the best in the world, and he continues putting in crazy work year after year after year. My runner-up, though, is a player who's been relatively new to the scene, but made a massive impact. That being Proud. Proud was disgusting on Poker Face, and he was a key contributor to their success. This guy is extremely promising, and he's definitely someone to keep an eye on next year as he continues to just get better. I hope to see him on one of these title contenders next year. As for the Flex DPS category, this one's a little messy. There are 3 main people to be considered, those being Proper, Hitscan, and Stalker. All 3 of these guys have been straight up dominant throughout this year, but the one who was the most consistent and the best throughout the whole season, for me, was Hitscan. Unlike Proper and Stalker, Hitscan really never had any down moments. It was just consistent domination throughout the whole season, and he's 100% has redeemed his year in Overwatch League. No matter the hero this guy picks, this guy is nuts. As for the poll, I actually did have a different pick, as 54% of you picked Proper. And honestly, I understand this pick. He's been really good lately, but I feel like this has just a little bit of recency bias in it. The earlier part of the season was rough for Proper, and honestly, I think Stalker was the better player in Stage 1. In contrast, Hitscan has been way more consistent and more dominant throughout the whole year. Don't get me wrong, Proper and Stalker are both fantastic players, and as a result, Proper is my runner-up with Stalker in a very, very close third. Honestly, this was probably the closest category for me, and on any given day, I could pick any of these 3 players. But for now, Hitscan has to be my pick. Moving over to support, my pick for Flex Support just has to be Shu. I mean, Shu has been his regular old dominant self, flexing onto whatever hero he's needed and just looking fantastic. He makes great plays, he is just generally so dominant. The poll also agrees, with 79% of people also choosing Shu. My runner-up this year is going to be Fielder, who has been really good this whole year. When Falcons were having some struggles, Fielder was always one of those bright spots. He helped them get them through rough patches, and he's just been one of their best players. Definitely a slept-on guy, however, Shu I think has just been better this year. but don't get me wrong, Fielder is right up there. As for main support, I just have to go with Chorong. I mean, I know it's a bit boring to go with the entire Crazy Raccoon sweep, but when a team is just this good and this consistent all season, it's pretty hard not to pick them. Chorong played really well. He was peeling for Shu perfectly, getting plays when he needed to. He was never the playmaker for Crazy Raccoon, but he's a main support, and aside from very few exceptions, they usually aren't those people that are getting those plays. As for the poll, 66% of you also picked Chorong, which I do think makes sense. My runner-up, obviously, is Chio. I mean, he had a really great season, all things considered. His Juno, which started out a little rough, became really good and gave Falcons the edge to finally beat Crazy Raccoon at the end of the year. But Chorong has been way more consistent this year, so he takes the cake. As a summary, my picks for each role are the entirety of Crazy Raccoon, Junbin, Lip, Hitscan, Shu, and Chorong. Obviously I didn't pick Max, but I mean, it's Junbin, so, you know. I know it's a little boring, but they were just the best team throughout the year. Falcons are really great, but they just weren't really consistent enough. Now, for my Korea MVP, I mean, realistically, it's a Crazy Raccoon player, but the question is, which one? And this actually might surprise you, but I'm not gonna pick Lip. I know, the Lip Glaze guy will not be choosing Lip. My choice was actually gonna be Shu, who is the guy who just stands out to me the most on Crazy Raccoon. This guy was on another level this year, and there were rarely moments where Shu was ever caught out. He is never the problem. He has always been so good this year, and as much as I love glazing Lip, don't get me wrong, Shu just has to win out for me. As for the poll, 47% of people chose Lip, which I do understand. Lip has truly been elite, one of the best hitscan players in the whole year. No one was really close. However, I personally think Shu's been more consistent this year, so he's my MVP. Don't get me wrong though, there really wasn't a bad answer this year. You could have picked anyone from Crazy Raccoon or even Proper, and I think that any of those are very valid choices. But for me, Shu just has to win out. Before we move over to EMEA and NA, please consider subscribing to this channel. We're getting pretty close to 1,000 subscribers, and I'd really love to hit that milestone before 2025. So, if you like Overwatch Esports, Overwatch League, or Overwatch in general, just consider subscribing. With the shilling done though, let's move over to EMEA. And let's just be real, this region was a bit all over the place, and it was a real big fight between two major teams for all of these awards. And starting out with Tank, my choice has to be Vestola. Vestola was the most consistent tank in EMEA, always playing well on characters like Sigma, Diva, Orisa, Ramatra, or anything else he's needed on. Vestola has been so dominant, helping Ensign all of their successful moments. And as for the poll, Vestola also won there, receiving 60% of the vote, which honestly just makes sense, just due to how well he did. As for my runner-up, I had to make a really hard choice. KSA and Hadi were both fantastic this year. In fact, KSA has been straight up dominant when he did play. Unfortunately, he didn't play for a good chunk of the year. He was completely missing in Stage 3, and he barely played in Stage 2. And honestly, that holds him back from being picked for me. He just doesn't have enough playtime, nor consistency, and for that reason, my runner-up has to be Hadi. The Ryan guy has been pretty good this year, helping SSG through most of their success, even playing other heroes other than Ryan, which has been pretty good. Hadi's definitely made a step up from his 2021 Spitfire days, and it's really cool to see. Moving over to Flex DPS, this was not a close race at all. Kevster was the easy pick, and the poll agrees. 86% of people also chose Kevster, and he just continues to be the best player in EMEA every single game. Although his Mei wasn't exactly perfect this year, his Tracer, Genji, and pretty much whatever else he plays have all been fantastic, and sometimes he gets wins for Ents all by himself. As for my runner-up, I've got to go with Psycho. Psycho has been criminally underrated since his debut, and he's been performing fantastically all year. His Tracer in particular is straight up nasty, and I'm happy to see him getting the success he needs. Now granted, I do think Kevster is a lot better, but Psycho deserves a ton of credit for just how good he's playing and for helping SSG over the humps in multiple stages. Unlike Flex DPS, Hitscan was truly a tough pick. I was pretty back and forth on picking this one, but ultimately, I decided on Sparker being my pick. Sparker has just been consistently dominant all season. He was a top 2 hitscan in every single stage, and he always looked just so good all year long. He's flashy, he's consistent, and he is a key component to SSG's success this year. As for the poll, the winner was actually Quartz, with a mere 50% of the votes, which, I don't know if you've noticed, is the lowest percent of any winner in all of these polls, which just has to go to show how close this one was. It was truly a close result, and I understand why people would pick Quartz. He's flashy, he carries his team in every single game. However, I believe that this result is definitely due to a lot of recency bias. Don't get me wrong, Quartz was very good in Stage 1, and recently, in Stage 4, he was crazy. But Stage 2 and 3 were pretty bad for him, all things considered. Sparker has been dominant all year, and he has been just as good, if not better, in those stages where Quartz was good. Sparker had no truly bad stages, unlike Quartz. Now, to give Quartz some credit that he deserves, he had to put in an insane amount of work to carry Twisted to pretty much every win they got. And for that reason, Quartz is easily my runner-up. Quartz basically had to play down a player and do the work of 2 DPS players every match because UB is genuinely that fucking bad. His team is ever-changing due to the toxic nature of certain teammates, and honestly, I really hope Quartz gets off Twisted Mind next year. I'd love to see him on a better team. Like, imagine a Kevster Quartz DPS line. That would be straight up nasty. Although Quartz has had a pretty good season, all things considered, it was nowhere near as successful, dominant, or consistent as Sparker, who just is easily my pick for best EMEA Hitscan. Moving over to support, I don't think that either one of these results are going to surprise you. My pick for flex support has just gotta be Landon. This guy has been a consistent playmaker for SSG, always being reliable and getting the job done. His BAP is just so nasty, and he is pretty good at pretty much every hero he touches. Landon was by far the most consistent flex support in EMEA, and the poll agrees, with 83% of the vote leaning towards this guy, and for good reason. My runner-up for flex support has to be Kanale, who I think had a really great showing this year. His BAP, Zen, Ana were all fantastic, and he definitely gave Landon a real run for his money. But as good as he is, Landon just can't be beat this year. As for main support, my pick obviously has to be Funny Astro. He's just been so dominant on that Lucio all season. SSG do have that advantage of being the only other team other than VP to keep their support line all season. But honestly, even if the other teams kept their supports all season, I still think Landon and Funny Astro would win, just due to how good they were. As for the poll, it agreed, with 79% of people also voting for Astro. As for my runner-up, Gala is a great pick. I mean, there aren't many main supports with this much flexibility, but players like Gala and Vega over in NA have a surprisingly deep hero pool for a main support player. Not only does Gala play Lucio, but he also plays Kiriko and Olari too, and his Olari is pretty good. Even though he has this flexibility, his actual main support play just can't keep up with Funny Astro, but both players are quite good. As an EMEA summary, my picks were Vestola, Kevster, Sparker, Landon, and Funny Astro. As for my EMEA MVP, I had a pretty easy choice this year, to be honest. Of these 5, my pick just had to be Kevster. Kevster has been a dominant force all year, when he's not on May, and he has been a key role in its success throughout the year. When Kevster isn't able to dominate, Ents lose. If Kevster is subbed out, Ents lose. And in a lot of fights where Kevster dies first, they lose. Kevster has been the best player in EMEA for years now, and Ents just wouldn't be the same without him. As for the poll, 62% of people also ended up picking Kevster, and I think that makes a lot of sense. As a whole, Kevster, although he may not be as dominant as year prior, is still an absolute nutcase throughout the year, and is undisputedly the EMEA MVP and the best European player we've ever had. Moving over to NA, this region was definitely the easiest region to pick from. Starting out with Tank, my pick obviously had to go to someone. I mean, the 2023 MVP continued to dominate. He was a menace all season long. His flexibility on Tank is only really matched by players like Bernard, and he was leagues ahead of every other Tank player in NA this year. The poll agrees, 70% of people also voted for someone, and I think this makes sense. Not only is someone a great player, but he is also on the dominant Toronto Defiant, which you might notice as a pattern for the votes this year. Someone's a great guy, and he's a really flexible, really strong player, so he's an easy pick. My runner-up this year was definitely Infected, who had a really breakout year this year, establishing himself as the best American tank player now that Hawk is gone. This young guy has shown that there's some real talent hidden in NA, and I'm curious to see where he goes from here. As for Flex DPS, this one was not close at all. Sugar Free was the easy pick, with a whopping 91% of people agreeing in the poll. Fun fact, that was the most votes one candidate received. 91% of people thought it was Lenny. Lenny has simply just been so good this year, even being on par with or better than his Korean teammates. His Flex DPS has been straight up nasty this year, and he is so flexible that he can always clutch up no matter what comp is being played. When Toronto are playing, it is always Lenny time. As for my runner-up, I decided to go with Zira, who I think is a player who's been criminally underrated this whole season. His Flex DPS play, namely his Genji and Tracer, have been really good for Nightmare, and I'm really glad to see him succeed. He may not be as flashy as Lenny, but Zira is a really good prospect to keep your eye on, and he's a lot better than people give him credit for. I mean, this guy is arguably the second best Flex DPS in NA. He is a scary good talent. Keep your eyes on this guy. As for Hitscan, I'm sorry, I gotta pick another Toronto player, Merit. I mean, be prepared for more Toronto picks upcoming, but honestly, how can I not pick these guys? Toronto have just been so dominant all year, and aside from literally 2 losses, they have crushed this region. Merit had a couple rough spatches like here and there, but for the most part, he's been fantastic all season. His Ashe, Cass, and especially his Widowmaker have been straight up disgusting, and it's really good to get to watch the guy this year. As for the poll, 52% of votes ended up picking Merit, and I think that makes sense. Yeah, he wasn't as dominant as Lenny, but he was still definitely good enough to be the best in NA. As for my runner-up, Seeker is an easy pick. Seeker has been dominant on every single hero he touches, and if he was on a consistent team throughout the year, he could be competing for that #1 spot. Nightmare had been a really good team for him, and he looks really good. Unfortunately, due to having to change teams a bunch in the early part of the year, I just can't justify him putting against Merit. For the Flex Support category, RuPaul is an easy choice. RuPaul has been widely considered to be the best Western Flex Support for 2 years now, and for very good reason. His Ana, Bat, Kiri, and whatever else he needs to play have all been super good, and he is a key reason for Toronto's success. The community poll agrees, with 81% of people also picking RuPaul for best NA Flex Support. RuPaul, for the most part, has been untouchable, and he has been able to make consistent plays that help give Toronto an edge. As for my runner-up, I decided on Ultraviolet. UV has been a consistent top 2 NA Flex Support, both when he was on M80 and on NRG. He is consistent, positive, and he's part of the reason why NRG are as good as they are. Mad respect for Cal and CJ, but UV just has to be my runner-up. The final award goes to the NA Main Support, and this was one of the closer polls. My personal choice for main support, as boring as it is, has to be another Toronto player, Vega. Vega has definitely impressed people this year, not only having a nice Lucio and Brig, but also having a nasty Alari. Most people saw him as the weak spot for Toronto, pretty understandably, but honestly, he held his own this year, showing why he was picked up for this roster. The poll agreed, with 58% of people also choosing Vega. As for my runner-up, you already knew who I'm picking, it's the GOAT, Rack Attack. Rack has been great this year, having a phenomenal Brig, a great Lucio, and his Life Lever, as bad as that character is, has been pretty solid all things considered. It's great to see the guy do well, and I am more than happy to give him my runner-up award. As a whole, North America has just been dominated by the Toronto Defiant, with all 5 of them winning in each position, but the question really is, which one of those Toronto players are the NA MVP? Well, it just has to be Sugar Free. Lenny has been the best Western player all year and was able to give Korean Flex DPS like Alfie a real run for their money. He is the best Flex DPS in NA without a doubt, and he is clutch to an insane degree. The poll agrees with this sentiment, with 66% of people picking Lenny as their NA MVP, and I have to agree. To be honest, you could probably pick any member of Toronto, as I think pretty much all of them work. They've all been fantastic. NA has been pretty much run by this team, but I think Lenny is a really great choice. Well, there you have it. My choice and you guys' choice for the OWCS Awards. I really enjoyed making this video, and hearing what you all think was a really great experience. So, if you enjoyed this kind of video, I would really appreciate it if you subscribed. Like I said earlier, we're getting pretty close to 1,000 subscribers, and I would love to hit that milestone by the end of the year. If you like Overwatch Esports, Overwatch League, or just Overwatch in general, just consider subscribing for weekly Overwatch content. I really hope to be able to do more community-based stuff in the future, so let me know what ideas you guys might have in the comment section below. A quick reminder to everyone that these are all my opinions, and if you disagree, that's cool, but don't be negative, don't be toxic, everyone is entitled to their own opinions, and if you have a different one, let me know down in the comment section below. As I've said before, I have a Twitter, link in the description, so follow me there for some shitty takes. But, as always, thank you so much for watching.